Good evening, and welcome to this meetup. We're glad you can make it out tonight. My name is John. I'm with Apic, and I'm the CTO, Chief Architect, and sometimes dishwasher at Apic. We're a really small company. We're just getting going. We got a couple development teams, and we're hoping to expand. And part of this tonight, we're going to go over and we're going to look at Blazor. And let me just. I should have thought about that. Anyhow, we're going to go ahead and go over Blazor a little bit tonight. We're going to look at Wasm, talk about what it is, and we're going to talk about some of the common mistakes that I see, especially when it comes to state management in a Blazor Wasm project. And I'm going to show you how to fix that using observables. If you've worked with Angular in the past, a lot of this is going to look pretty familiar to you. If you haven't, that's okay. It's still going to be fun. And if you've got questions, the only thing that I'd ask is save them till the end, and then we'll just kind of go around the room and ask those questions. Now, I don't have the code pushed up to a GitHub repository yet, but I will push it up to a GitHub repository, and you'll be able to find a video that we're recording right now, which is live. So thank you to anybody joining us from wherever you are in the country right now. This video is going live, and you'll be able to see that on the Apic techacademy.net users group page. If you just search for that on Facebook, you'll find it. And then we'll also post some links to the GitHub repository that we put with the final code in it, so that you can go and look at some of what we've done here tonight and maybe apply some of that in some of the work that you guys do in the future. To start, though, I do kind of want to take a minute and talk about Apic. That's kind of the catch, right? We feed you. We give you a little bit of training, and in return, we get to tell you about us. So we're a small company. We've been around for just over 2 years now. It was founded by me and another person. His name's Kazra Oji. Kazra lives in Ashburn, Virginia. Most of our team members don't live in Florida or Virginia. They're just spread out across the country. So we're very into the remote working scene. If you're new and getting started in the software development world and you're looking for some mentorship, we do have an apprenticeship program that we sponsor young developers in. You can check that out. We're refreshing our website in the next few days, maybe coming week. I'd say give us 7 days, and when you go to apic.com, you'll have our new website. And on that new website, if you go to, I think it's About Us, and you'll see a picture of me and Kaz there. I'm really sorry. I know it hurts to look at, but scroll down to the bottom, and you'll see a link that says something like Join Us. And if you scroll down to the bottom of the page that takes you to, it'll say, are you new to software development? If so, click here, and that'll tell you about our apprenticeship program. It comes in 2 stages. The very first stage is we give you a bunch of material to go study and to go learn. It's kind of very self-paced, very on your own. Some of those materials are free. Some of those materials cost you money if you want to use them, and we kind of give you just a bunch of resources to go get the knowledge, and the knowledge that we're looking for someone starting in the program. When you can come back and pass an oral exam with all that information in it, we'll take you on into stage 2. We assign a mentor to you, and you get the opportunity to learn from people that are actually working in the industry right now. So for those of you at home just finishing high school, thinking about college, and thinking about some of the expense tied to that, this is a really good way for you to get into software development without spending a fortune and coming out of it in debt. For those of you who are engineers and you've been in the game for a while, we do have a wonderful engineering program. Everything that we do is on a contractor basis, but we put our contractors into teams, and those teams operate autonomously. And by that, we mean they're completely self-managing. No one ever comes to me and says, hey, John, I want to take time off. Sometimes they'll send me an email and say, hey, John, I'm going to be gone next week. That's the best I get. And that's actually kind of what we want. The team understands what their load is, and they work together to achieve the goals of the team to try and get our projects pushed out. So it's a very open environment. We pay people based on points. We don't pay people by the hour. So a little bit different here, but if you're into agile software development, you have any experience there, that methodology might seem a little bit familiar. we do, when we have a project, we estimate that project out. We use a scale, and my brain just went blank. I don't remember what the scale is, but it's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours. It's a mathematical sequence where you Fibonacci. That's it, right there. Thank you. We use the Fibonacci scale when we're assigning those point values, and the idea is that the engineers that are working those tickets tell us how long they think it's going to take using that Fibonacci pattern. So if you think it's going to take you 9 hours to do it, well, it's a 13-hour ticket or a 13-point ticket, and then you get paid per point. So we have payouts that we call it direct pay, where you'll get paid for the work that you do. We have assist pay, where you get paid for helping another engineer complete their tickets and helping to train that engineer. And then as you come up in our system, eventually we hope that you'll graduate to a lead engineer position and lead a team. And at that point, you make a percentage off of every point that your team does, as well as your own time. So we're building a system that kind of gives you guys the ability to come with us on the journey as we're building Apic. We take a lot of information and feedback from our teams. Anytime our company runs into a problem, we come together as a company to solve that problem. And I think that's really what's led to our success recently. If you're in this tonight and you're looking at Blazor and also thinking about where your career might head, we'd invite you to come and check us out and look at that. In addition, if you're happy where you're at, but people that aren't happy, that are looking for something else, or someone that's been displaced by COVID, or a myriad of things that leaves us without a job, we would love to have people come and join us at Apic. Definitely send them a link to this video, let them watch it, and let them learn about us. So that's my spiel. I'm going to go ahead and jump into the meat of the discussion tonight, which is Blazor Wasm. This is a framework built on top of C# and .NET Core to be specific. And Blazor Wasm has really only been around for about 3 years, which in the world of technology is kind of a long life. We're on .NET Core 5 right now, with .NET Core 6 being released this fall. Everything that I'm going to show you today comes from .NET Core 5. And I've got an application that I've been building. I'm actually going to use Writer tonight to work in. It's my preferred IDE. Although there are times I use Visual Studio, but this is what I'm going to use tonight. So we'll open up Simple Task here. And Simple Task is an application I designed because sometimes I sit around and my wife will tell me I'm completely lazy and I get nothing done. So I needed, like everybody else does, a task management system. And I think I've built a pretty awesome task management system here. I'm going to go ahead and turn on this system. So it has an API. That API is built in ASP.NET Core. It's communicating with a database that is running locally on the machine here. So we will start up that API. It'll just take it a second here. And next, we will start up the portal app, which is my amazing, good, beautiful, well-designed Simple Task application. You guys are going to love this. I've spent a lot of time on it, so if you don't clap, I'll probably throw something at you for those of you that are here. So when you see the page, big round of applause, please. Help me out here. So we'll start that. We'll come over here, go to localhost 6001, and there it is, guys. That is the front page right here. Yes, thank you. I wasn't expecting that, but thank you. Simple Task is a project designed to help you manage tasks in a simple task setting environment. With Simple Task, you can create groups, assign people to groups, and even assign tasks to people in those specific groups. We thought that last feature was super useful. As we scroll down here, you can see those features reiterated here. We like to talk about the tasks and the groups and everything here, and it's a very beautiful design. We spent 10 minutes putting this together. I hope you love it. And then, I've got this little blurb down here that's really nice. So if your team sits around all day and never gets anything done, you should start by finding a new team. After that, I highly recommend a tool like Simple Task, except maybe you should choose something that's going to last a little bit longer than my demo. I hear Microsoft has a great tool for engineering teams. They call it DevOps, but I digress. The important thing is you got to do something, right? Little disclaimer at the bottom of this. Like I said, I am going to make this available on GitHub so you guys can download this. But I do want to point out that Simple Task was designed by me, Jonathan D. Smith, as a training tool for Epic Tech Academy presentations. We highly recommend that you do not use this in a production environment. But if you do decide to use that, if you do decide not to use that advice, then I actually consume a crap ton of Mountain Dew. And it's really a huge expense for our organization, so I could always use support to that fund to help alleviate your overburdened conscience. Anyhow, we'll jump right into the heart of this application, which is task making. And there we go. We've got some groups. And if I click on these groups, we can see that we have some tasks here. So it works pretty well. And you can write bad code and have it work fairly well. I can come in here. I can add a new person, even though it says group there. And let me just see. What was your name again? We'll add Derek. And let's put unknown here because I don't know your last name, and the whole world doesn't need to know. We'll put unknown at example.com here, and we'll save that. And when we do, you'll see, hey, look, there we go. We have Derek Unknown who has joined our team. And our end goal for this is to be able to assign these tasks to people and actually complete these tasks. But right now, it's a work in progress, okay? So let's jump in and look at some of the code that's sitting behind this. And we'll go there and then come back and take a look at some things. So first off, we have our API. And, I've really tried to do all the things that I preach against in this particular piece of code. So as we jump into the controllers, you will see all of my logic, all of my data access, everything setting right here at the presentation layer. Please do not do this. And any of my engineers who are watching this video to kind of learn a little bit more, please do not do this. This is not how we write clean code, obviously. We would want to separate this out, and we actually go back and forth between the mediator pattern and the in-tiered architecture pattern for separating that out. But this works. I mean, right now it is working. And if I wanted to switch out Entity Framework, it would be a little bit of work because it's kind of everywhere. But it works. And we're not here to work on the API tonight, so I'll probably just leave that as it is. Let's take a look at the domain. The domain has a group, a person, and a work task. Pretty simple. And if we open that up, you'll see that those are, for the most part, just POCOs. Nothing special going on here. We're using Entity Framework to take and create tables in our database and push data in and out. Our view models are right here, and they're all named group, person, task, VM. We put that VM on the end so that we know, hey, this is a view model. And this is actually really important. It actually kind of bit me in the butt because I forgot to do this earlier today. But if you just take and start using your entities in the front end and allow those to pass between your API and your presentation, at some point, you're probably going to get an error that's going to tell you that you've got some cycling issues with your JSON as it's being converted from a C# object into JSON. There's a few different ways to solve that. I'm not really going to go into that here, but my favorite way to solve that is to just create a view model separate from the data model that doesn't have those cycles in it, or what's the word that I'm looking for? Circular dependencies, circular references. That's it, circular references. So that's how we typically avoid it at Epic, is we just make custom view models that send back just what our front end needs. And that's what you'll see here tonight. One of the things that I love about working in Blazor is when it comes to what we're using on these pages. If I open up, for instance, our groups page, which this is the page that we use to show all the different groups to start, you'll notice that when we get down here into the heart of our code, we're using that same group VM that's used on the API. And this is what Blazor allows you to do that you really cannot do with JavaScript, right? With JavaScript, we can use the JSON, but I have to take and, if I'm working in Angular, I have to make TypeScript models that mirror my models over in C#. Well, here, I just write that code once, and if I update it in one place, I don't have to worry about, did I forget to update it over there? It's all right here, and they share the common models. And this allows us to also share common validation logic. This allows us to share a lot of business logic that maybe we might want to run on the front end and the back end. There's a lot of benefit to doing this, a lot that you get out of using C# in the browser, and that's frankly one of the things that I love most about using Blazor is I get to take my C# and my .NET Core code and I get to use it in the browser instead of having to rewrite that. So for me, it cuts down on that time that I spend building the code. And I actually wrote this in one day, which was today because I procrastinate. I know none of you do that, right? No procrastinators here? Okay, a little bit. Becca's like, I just learned how to use this software this afternoon, so. No, but anyhow, so, that's one of the things that we love, but there's something that we're doing wrong here, and I don't know if you've caught it yet, and that is all of this logic that's happening right here on the page. And if you go and you look at a lot of the different tutorials for how to use Blazor, this is actually what I see a lot of them teach people how to do, and it drives me crazy. Because I might be calling the exact same logic or the exact same ABI call in 4 different places to get the exact same piece of data over and over and over again in my application, when really if I just bring that into some services, what we can do is start to minimize those calls to the database. We can store state, and as we go back and forth between the pages, we only need to reload that state when something changes. So I'm going to go ahead and actually, I think this is... No, it's not running anymore. So let me go ahead and start it again. And I want to point out some things that are happening in the browser as this is running. So we got the API started there. And we'll start the portal next. There we go. And I don't guarantee that there are no bugs in this code, by the way. Like I said, procrastination here. Okay, I haven't done a ton of debugging, so hold on tight. Here we go. I don't normally test, but when I do, it's in production. Don't show this to my customers. No, I'm just joking. I don't test in production. We actually have a wonderful test team. And Kazra would kill me if he heard me say that. So it was a joke. Purely a joke. So what I want to show is I'm going to open up the developer tools here. And for those of you following along at home, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit function F12. Or actually, I'm just going to hit F12 because I'm not on a Mac. I'm on a PC at the moment. That's right. I do a lot of my .NET coding on my Mac or on Linux. That's one of the other things I love about .NET Core is it works everywhere. So here we go. We've got our page loading. And what I want to do is I want to go over here to the network, and we're going to watch traffic. So I'm going to hit this. And when I do, we're going to make a call to this page called 6. It's actually group/6, and it's part of our API. And what we're doing is group number 6. We're going and retrieving it and bringing it back. Well, I hit the wrong groups, so I'm going to go back and notice I made a call to groups, and I got these groups here, right? I'm going to go ahead and look at Becca. That one's number 5. That's the one I meant to get. But actually, I need to add some people to the first group in there. So I'll hit back, and notice what happened. Even though I've already gotten this data, it hasn't changed, right? I haven't added a new group. I haven't added a new user. I still went and got it again. And I'm going to go ahead and click here, and you see that as I go back once again, we will pull the groups. So that's the first problem that I want to fix. When we're working on the Azure cloud, or we're working on even our own hardware, we have limitations on the amount of resource that we have. And if everybody's calling the same endpoint over and over and over again to get the same thing, that's using a lot of processing power that, frankly, we don't need to use. So especially in today's consumer or serverless world where we're moving towards consumption plans where every call gets charged on your Azure account instead of you being charged for this big honking server running all the time, it gets really important to fine-tune this, and this can be the difference between $100 and $700. And so what we're going to do is we're going to make it to where our application only gets the groups once and stores that, and we call that information state information. That's really the heart of the matter that we're going to get to tonight. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to have to pull some logic out of our C# code here. So we've got this C# code. I'm going to blow it up so everyone at home can see it. Can you guys see it okay here? Is that pretty readable? Awesome. So we've got all of this code here. I'm going to pull this off to the side, make a little bit of room here for coding. Yeah, there we go. And we'll pull this down. There we go. That'll maximize our visibility here. And so what we're going to do now, and we just make sure that we've got our screen as the main focus here. And are we live with our screen right now? Is that yes? Okay, awesome. So then what we're going to do is we'll come down here, and we're going to start looking at some of these things that we can pull out. And this update data routine, this happens a lot. So let's actually take this, and we're going to build some services. So I'm going to come over here. We'll build a new directory here. We'll call it services. Seems like a cool place to put services. And we'll create a new class in here. And we're going to call this the group service. All right. And we could certainly take it a step further and create an interface and go through all that. But on the front end, I kind of feel like it's a little bit not as important as it is on the back end, because if you're replacing the front end code, you aren't going to replace part of it. You're going to replace all of it. So I typically, we're going to use dependency injection. You'll see a lot of that, but you're not going to see a lot of interfaces floating around here on the front unless they come from some back end library that's shared between the back end and the front end. So we got our group service here, and first thing that we're going to do is we're going to need to inject a few things, and to do that we need a constructor. So we're going to inject an HTTP client, and we will call it HTTP client because I love to name things. I hope you guys are starting to see that. And we'll just get a read-only variable field at the top, and let's start with getting this information. That's probably the first thing we want to do. So we'll create a private async void get groups. And what get groups will do is it will use the same code that we wrote over here to go and get our groups. So we'll get that, and we'll call it all groups. We pretty much just copy and paste most of this right here. All right. Oh, and let me just zoom that in so you guys can see what I'm doing here. And yeah, it's going to tell me there's just a lot of stuff that it doesn't like here. Yeah, there we go. Of course, it wants an underscore here. I will oblige it. There you go. And there we go. That should get our groups. And we're going to do a little check here to make sure that indeed all of these groups are coming back. Well, there we go. All right, so now we've got the code to get our groups, but this really doesn't do much for us because we haven't exposed it anywhere. This is a private method, and the method's not really even returning groups. Now we could just take and make this return a list of groups or an IEnumerable of groups, and that would certainly allow us to get our groups, but we'd still have that same problem of every time we hit it, we would be going and getting groups and over and over and over again. So that's really not what we want to do here. And I'm going to bring in something. If you've worked in Angular, this is going to look pretty familiar to you, I think. We're going to add a library. Go up here to dependencies, manage NuGet packages, and we're going to get system dot reactive right there. And this is the .NET version of reactive. RxJS, if you've used it in Angular. This is just same thing. We're just using it here in C#, here in the .NET world. So we'll install that. It'll take just a second. And now that we've done that, we can create a private read-only behavior subject that stores a list of group VM, and we will call this groups. And I'm going to go ahead and set it right now to be a new behavior subject with nothing in it. So a behavior subject in the world of observables and reactive, what it does is, as we have things happening in our application, let's say we get a series of records and we store them in a set, a list here, and we put that list into this behavior subject, it's going to broadcast out and it's going to say, hey, I've got a new list, and anybody that's subscribed to that subject will then receive that new list, right? Now, the behavior subject you can add to it, and you can pull out of it. And so we've made that private because really everybody that's going to get access to this outside of our service here, we don't want them to be able to change the data that's in there. We only want them to be able to receive the data, right? So to facilitate that, we're going to do a public observable of list group VM, and we'll call this groups, and we're just going to use this little lambda expression. It's the same as if I come in here and I just write get. I'm doing the same thing, I'm just taking a shortcut. So we'll just use a little bit of lambda here, and we'll just make it this right here. And so now this iObservable does not have a way for us to push new values into it. It's only going to send out those signals or those events as we're putting stuff into the behavior subject. So this is what we make public. It's what we expose. Now we're going to come down here, and we've got our list called all groups. And so all we're going to do down here is we're going to take underscore groups, and we will call on next, and we will send it all groups. So now we've got it, and the service will be scoped and will live for the entire scope of the session. And as a result of that, once we create it, we don't have to recreate it over and over and over again. Actually, I think we're going to do singleton because there's not a reason to have more than one of these in the application at any given time. So when we inject this service, we'll come down here into program, and we'll go into our main class, our main method of our program class, and we will call builder dot services dot add singleton. And we will add, actually we don't need to do this because I can just come in here and do, actually I do want to do this, never mind, group service. Oh, there we go. And we'll add a group service there. Now we can use that up here in our groups. And we're just going to come up here to the very top, and we will inject a group service. And if you're running this and you start interacting with this group service and it's not working for you, it's telling you, hey, I can't find this group service, just make sure that you went back here to program and that you've added it to the dependency collection, builder.services, and add singleton to add that group service. So coming back over here to our group page, what we're going to do now is we're going to subscribe on initialize to the groups, and we're going to put it right there in all groups. So instead of this update data, we'll back off of that, and we will now use underscore group service dot groups dot subscribe, and we will pass it groups, and we will set all groups equals groups. And actually, I'm going to wrap this in a block because another thing that we need to do right after this is state has changed. And that tells the UI, hey, after I get this, I need to update the state. So now we've got this set up and it's going to subscribe. But here's what's going to happen. When we bounce back and forth, instead of having to go and get that list of groups over and over and over again, all it's going to do is subscribe to groups. And the last thing that was put inside that behavior subject is going to pop out of the observable and populate the page. So we no longer have to call the API to get that information every time that we load this page. So that's our huge advantage here, right? And we can come down here and we'll call update data next. And update data will run this code here, minus the code to actually get our groups, because we've already done that. And let's go ahead and restart the API, or restart the portal. And we'll jump out and take a look at that and see if that's made a difference in what we're getting over here. So we'll refresh, and it's going to go download all of those DLLs and pieces to run the application in the browser. And it actually is a piece of compiled code. I don't know if you can see it here, but it pulled the system.reactive.dll. It pulled simpletask.portal.dll. Here's the little WebAssembly JavaScript file. This is actually, if anyone tells you that come learn Blazor so you never have to write JavaScript again, they're lying to you. It would be wonderful. It would be really nice, except for one small inconvenience, and that is that WebAssembly, which is what makes Blazor work, does not have the ability to affect the DOM. So in order to affect the DOM, the C# code actually has to call JavaScript code to change the DOM. And so that's what the JS interop stuff does. And this is the JavaScript library that makes all of that magic happen. So you can see outside of that, though, we've loaded everything up here, and we are sitting here and stuck on something. Let's go take a look at what's going on. HTTP client from Singleton. Oh, yeah. So here's a problem. So we made our service. Our service has an HTTP client, and you can see it right here. And what we did was we took and made our service take in this HTTP client through injection. But if we go all the way out to our program.cs and we look at things, when we add this HTTP client, it is scoped. Well, we're going to change that. And there's a better way to handle this too, but this is how I'm going to handle it for now. So another way that I could handle it is just by making some things static back in my service. Like I can make the behavior subject static so that they retain it as a single value no matter how many instances of the class exist. And then I could take in the HTTP client as a scoped variable still. And so this problem is happening because the variables inside the dependency injection layer are set up to work in different scopes. So we've fixed that now. They're both running in Singleton, and so now if I refresh this, it should like me again. We'll everybody cross their fingers here, and here it come groups maybe. Groups. Do I get groups? I don't get groups, but there's a reason I don't get groups. I actually did not set up a way to load those groups. So a bit of important information that I left out here. Let's come back to our group service. And right here in our group service, the very first thing that I want to do after I set up everything is probably get those groups, because if we have no groups, we've got that lovely observable pattern there. It's very pretty, but it has nothing in it. So let's give it a little more substance, and we'll come over here and refresh. And hey, look, there are our groups. Now, the really cool thing is I can open up Becca's group, and we see Becca's group there. Let's go over here to the network. We will clear this, and notice that when I go back, I don't go get those groups again. And they're already there. Did you see how fast that page loaded? This is another reason why you want to use state management. I don't know if you remember, but last time that we did this, it took it a second because it had to go make that call and bring that data back. But now as I bounce back and forth, the data is right there. That is just so smooth and so fast. And we're already seeing that performance. And if we look over here, you can see that the only things that we're really doing at this point is going in and getting those individual groups, which we can clean that up too. Like we brought all the groups back in this first call. We probably don't need to go make independent calls for each one of these groups. But now we're going to have a slight problem, and that is if I come in here and add, what was your name again? Matt? Ben. We're going to add Ben's group so you can whip people into shape at that place you work. You told me. I don't remember. I'm sorry. I'll hit this, though, and hey, look, we added the group, and it looks like it added it. I got a 201 over here, which generally means that it was able to insert our data, but I don't see it. Let's just refresh the page, and that fixed it, but that's probably not the experience that we want, right? We probably want it to automatically, right, take care of that instead of us having to refresh the page. Probably not the best user experience. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to go back into our group service here. And in our group service, we're going to add a public method. And we will call this public async void refresh data. And refresh data we'll call get groups. That's pretty much it. Now we just need to come over here to our groups view, and when we add a group, instead of calling update data, we will call our group service dot refresh data. Now I know what you're thinking, well, how's that gonna, there's a lot of other code that happens in that update data that, now you're kind of ignoring that, right? Except not really, because update data gets ran every time that these groups change, right? So if I call refresh data, and refresh data goes and gets the list, and then puts the list and calls on next and passes it that list and stores it in the behavior subject, the behavior subject's going to go out through the observable, through all of the subscriptions, and say, hey, I've got something new here. It could be the exact same list. So if I called it and nothing had changed, then I'd have the same list. But that's still going to cause it to fire up here on this subscription, and that subscription is going to go and update the data after it saves the groups. So if we run this now, we should be able to see that happen in real time. Let's bounce back over here. We'll refresh the app, and I will add a group. What's your name, sir? Blake. Blake, thank you so much. And we will add a group, and there it is. Blake's group was there pretty dang quick, and we didn't have to do anything else. And once again, if I jump into Blake's group and jump back, I'm not doing additional calls to get this, except I am doing the same call here, which is probably bad. That's probably the next thing I should look at fixing. But we'll save that for another presentation, because the purpose of this presentation was to demonstrate how to save state in an observable service. I call these observable state services. That's what we called them when I worked in Angular, which this is a pattern that if you're making enterprise software for so I am kind of to the point here where we can take some questions, and I am wondering if anybody has some questions. So anybody in here first off? Any comments online either?
I have a question. Shoot.
So what do you do if someone else modifies the data in the meantime?
Well, this is a Blazor application, and so it's really just dealing with the client. So as far as the Blazor side of things goes, you're not going to have multiple users because it's your browser only, right? Mm-hmm. So the application is managing state inside of itself. Now, if you're logged into the application, I'm logged into the application, you want to add that, and we want to see it pop up here. That's when we start using something like SignalR. Then that SignalR connection would then notify the application that it needs to go and fetch the data again. Okay. We could also push that data through a SignalR connection, through a WebSocket, and if we set that up, then the backend could notify the front end when things change. And that has some pros and cons. One of the biggest cons is the memory resource required to keep that connection open. So typically speaking, if you're going to build this in the Azure cloud, they have a SignalR implementation that's separate from your application. And you would probably want to use that and find some way to pass notifications back and forth without relying on your application code. Because as soon as you start relying on your application code, now what's happened is you've moved from being consumption-based to being something that's got to be always on, right? Because once those connections are up, they're up and they stay on and they keep going. So that can get very expensive, especially if you're building an application that you're going to have a lot of people hit. So you kind of want to take those considerations into your mind as you're factoring those factors into consideration as you're trying to figure out how to handle that. But some back-end messaging service would probably be a much better approach to that than trying to just tie SignalR directly into your web API. So, yeah, any other questions? Those are good questions. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Online. If you're online and you've got questions, please feel free to comment and let us know. I don't know how many people are watching. I don't know how to know how many people are watching. But hopefully there's a few. But if not, and you have questions later, I guess you can email those to me. At john.smith@appic.com, and you can find out more about us as a company at appic.com. And in fact, if you want to push that up, just the little www.appic.com thing there. It's just APPECH. It's really all I got for you. I was thinking this would take a little bit longer tonight, but yeah, about an hour and we're in and done. Does anybody want to see anything else? I've got a horribly coded Blazor project here that we can play with. I'm open to suggestions.
How long would it take to clean up the project?
I don't know. We can find out. I've got at least another 45 minutes so we can blow. So, probably the next thing that I would do is, if we go back over here, this logic, living here, I don't like a lot of logic in my front-end presentation here, so I would probably move this into another observable. And we can go do that real quick. That'll be fun. So I'll show you something else really cool about observables that I enjoy anyways, is the ability to kind of mold those observables on the fly. So I have this one observable here in this one list, and I have these rows. You can see them here. This is one row. This is the second row. And every time I hit the third one here, it creates a new row, and it's building that on the fly. So every time it loads the page, it's building that out. And what would be really cool, I think, is if I could just move all the code that's building those rows, because there's a row object with item 1, item 2, item 3 in it. If I just take all of that logic and move it off into the service and out of the component. So turns out that there is a pretty simple way to do this, and that's by creating another observable here. Public observable list of, I'm going to call it, got it here, I've got some view models that are just particular to the front end here. I call it group row. That's a good name, right? It's a row of groups, group row. And what's supposed to class before me? I did a great job naming that. Come on, Cassie, drop my ego. Thank you. And we'll call this group rows. That makes sense, right? And what this is going to be is just groups select, and we'll take our take the whole list. Am I taking the whole list here? Groups. Let's see what's in groups. Groups is a list. Yes, that's what I want. Cool. Yeah, we will go in here and we'll do for each. Actually, no. I've already written this code. I don't know why I'm writing it again. I must really love writing code. I'm a huge code writing machine. I write code in my sleep. Actually, do any of you guys dream in the languages that you use? Sometimes that's really creepy. And if you're young and just getting started and you're going to be a good engineer, I hear it happens to all of us. It's something to look forward to.
I would hate to dream in PHP.
I would hate to dream in PHP. I hate coding in PHP and looking at PHP code. So if it were happening in my dream, it would probably be a nightmare. I would be terrified. I'd wake up screaming. Those of you new to programming, if you want to have a long and fabulous career programming, corporate applications, business level, nice things, don't mention that you use PHP. We'll destroy it for you. Well, I'm probably going to get some flack over that statement. Luckily, none of my close friends write in PHP, so or if they do, they haven't told me because they know how I feel about it. So I don't feel like I've got a lot of risk there. Take this and let's just rename it. Rows. Apply that refactored. And this just needs to become G. Don't need to call state has changed, but we need to return, rows. Now, I have magically turned my list into a list of an observable of group row. I don't know if you can see that, but now instead of being a list of groups, if you call group rows, you're going to get a list of group rows. So I can call either. I can subscribe to groups, or I can subscribe to group rows, and I'm going to get exactly what I need. Now this is kind of a long and arduous piece of code to put inside of a piece of Lambda inside of a property. And I would probably smack any one of my engineers who did this. So let's come down here and do the proper thing, shall we? We'll create a private method, and it does not need to be async. It needs to return a list of group row. Get group rows. It will take in a list of VM, call that G. Yes, I will rename that. I would also be very offended if someone left names like G in there. I hate magic strings. All the way down. All of that. Sneaking down here. It's not a little method that I made. It's a very for those of you watching, these guys are just silent in awe because of how amazing my code is. That's what's happening here. So, anyhow, now that I've done this, let's just call this groups. And we'll apply that refactoring. There we go. That's pretty clean. About that. And now, instead of a lambda, we can just pass it that method. What do I call it? Get group rows. Yeah, there we go. And it'll do its thing for us. So that's pretty awesome, right? So basically, I've got this here. That's my list of groups. And you can subscribe to groups or group rows. And when you subscribe to group rows, it's going to do that transform for you and return your list of group rows. So now we can kind of clean up what's going on down here in our groups tracer. Just get rid of all of that. Right? We don't even need to have update data anymore. That can go away. And instead of calling update data, we don't even need to manage all groups anymore because we really don't care about all groups. Instead, what we will do is we will subscribe to group rows, and we will assign rows. That cleans up that code quite a bit. I don't think I was using groups up here. I was not, so that's good. That's good. Nice and clean here, and we're getting a lot more clean. This is a lot closer to what I would want to see. So now when we refresh and run this, we can see this code being handled through an observable and loading our rows if we did it right. If I did it wrong, it'll explode. And that's also cool. I like explosions, right? Let's see what happens. Hey, that looks good. So there we go. That's another wonderful thing that I love about observables. There's lots of different pipes and things that you can use in JavaScript and TypeScript, which is really cool. But in C#, we have reactive link. So all your reactive code works with link. If you know what link is, it's really awesome. It's a fluid API for working with records. And we're using it here. It looks great, wonderful. It's working. I can go back and forth here. There we go. And we're one step closer. Now, we're doing all of this stuff, and this stuff, it's like, maybe we can get rid of it. If I look up here in my code, I've got this on delete happening, and this on open group, and I can make this so much smaller. And let's do that. What do you guys think? I'm going to do it. I want to do it. Do you want to do it? Everybody want to do it? All right, so let's take the right, baby. Here we go. So, now what we need to do is we need to be able to delete a group. And right now, that's happening up here in our group card. And so you see our group card here, which takes in a group here. It has this on delete and on open. We are actually going to just ditch those. We're not going to have those at all. And instead, what we're going to do is we're going to come up here and we're going to inject our group surface. And I think we should name this group surface how many years? We'll call it group surface. And that was unanimous, by the way. I did take a look. Everybody agreed. And if you didn't agree at all, then we're all right. Anyhow, so we've got that. And now what we're going to do is we're going to call group service. I'm going to zoom in here. If this gets too small, will you guys remind me, hey John, I can't read that. We will come in here and we will I probably need to delete that one, but anyway, take that out too. And we need to pass in a group, so we're going to pass in this group. And it's red because that does not exist. It's okay, we will create it. So here we are, and what we're going to do is inject a navigation manager into our service. And if you haven't worked with Blazor, Navigation Manager is what allows you to go from one page to the next, and it just manages the navigation for your application, which is probably why they call it Navigation Manager. probably made sense to everything in Microsoft. They're probably really proud of it, and you're really proud of the names that come up with. Let's just go to the names, Ross. Navigation manager. Navigation manager, let's put a field on. Yep. Now if we come down here and we look at this new method that we just created, it's probably an open group. We can call navigation manager dot navigate to, and I think it is group slash, that's supposed to be a string. And we're actually going to use some interpolation here. We'll go to group slash at group dot, just like that. And we'll save that. So fix the first one. Next one that we got to do is this delete. Actually going to copy everything in the delete. I'll cut everything in the delete. And we'll go to group service dot delete group. And once again, we need to pass a group. So we will pass this group right here. And delete group doesn't exist, so we probably should create it. And there it is. We'll drop this lovely code right here in. And this is now at group ID. And this needs to be an async method. So we'll do that. And then when it is successful, what we're going to do is just update the groups again. And we will, do I have a refresh data? Yes, we'll refresh data. There we go. So we got our open, we got our delete. Now, that pretty much wraps up all of this. And that's a lot cleaner, and it's just using the service at this point. So now if we go to the group view again, we got all this code here. You notice this one's green, but these are gray. That means that it didn't find anything called onDelete. So it's looking at it going, what the hell are you smoking here, buddy? That doesn't exist. That's okay, because we will just slim this up now. And these are much, much smaller now, right? That's a little bit cleaner, a little bit smaller, less going on, less that we have to manage. I'm going to come down here and I'm just going to paste over these. And then we'll need to copy that, paste that, copy that, and paste that. So much cleaner on our HTML. And if we come down here, we no longer care about whether or not we deleted a group or opened a group. These things no longer matter to us. So this is getting much smaller. I don't know if you remember this when we started, but there's just a bunch of hoopla going on here, and now it's much, much cleaner. So the last one that we want to do is this group add. That feels to me like a really cool thing that would go on our group service. What do you think? So we're going to go to the add group card, right? And we'll zoom in here. So here's our add group card. And let's see here, we got our add group, our save group. Here we go. This is going to be the one right here. I feel it. Are you guys feeling it? Because I'm feeling it. Here we go. I'm going to X that out right there. And when we save this group, we will instead use our service and inject service that, and we'll come down here and call that and add group. That seems like an appropriate thing to name it. And set the group. Of course, it's going to tell us, hey, that doesn't exist. We'll fix that. We'll come over here, and again, this needs to be async. And we'll come down here and just paste in that code. And when it runs successfully, there we go. And when this runs successfully, which, by the way, when we're making these HTTP calls, if you're wondering what this goes back with a result message. And if that result message has a status code that is successful, then it'll set this to true. So then those features we're checking, we're saying, hey, were you successful at getting what we asked you to get? And if it is, then we probably want to go ahead and refresh our data. And we'll refresh the data. There we go. Otherwise, we will say, hey, that failed. That did not work out the way that we wanted it to. So is adding and state has changed actually needs to happen back on our card. So after we add the group, we will go is adding equals false. And state has changed. And that will update the UI. So anytime we do something with a variable, and so what's going on here is if we come back over here to the screen, you'll see right now add group doesn't have anything, it just says add group. And if I click on it, then it drops down and it gives us this box. This is all actually one control, and what it's got is it's got two modes. So it's either adding or it's not adding. So when you come in, is adding is set to false. And so you click the button and say, okay, I want to add something. And as soon as you do that, it creates a new group, shoves it in our group variable at the top here, and then says is adding is true. And as soon as it says is adding is true, then this whole block right here is shown with our little format. Right? And so because we did something that changed the DOM or changed the UI, we have to call this state has changed, because that's what tells Blazor, hey, I changed something, you should refresh. That actually calls the JavaScript and then refreshes the DOM for you. Makes all that magic and wonderfulness happen there. And notice that we're not really doing anything here anymore that is asynchronous so much. And there's some async stuff happening on the service, but we've now kind of moved to this fire and forget methodology, so we don't really care. We're just going to let it do its thing. Now, if I were developing this as a real application that I was going to sell to someone, or someone was paying me to develop it, I'd probably have a notification service so that if that didn't go the way that we wanted it to when it tried to delete or add or whatever, we'd pop a little toast notification saying, hey, look, we tried to do what you asked, but it didn't work out. But right now, the only thing that we're really going to get is a console message that said, hey, something broke. So we'll have to deal with that, but I'm probably not going to build notification services tonight. Unless you guys want to pay me to stay late. No one's volunteering, so we'll probably okay, so we can make that void now. We can make that work. That looks good. We're not doing any crazy calls here. And now that's doing what it needs to. So basically, if we go back to this groups, we don't need this anymore, right? We're not even listening for that. We want to make sure that we're not trying to send it anymore to add groups, new group, is false, request, change, on group added. We're not going to call that anymore. We'll just get rid of that. And as a result of getting rid of that, this up here is no longer going to work. Where's the code? Here it is. So say, hey, I don't know what this is. Well, that's okay. You don't even know what it is. We'll just get rid of it. We'll pretend like it never existed, as all bad code should be done. Okay, anyhow. Save that. And everything looks golden over here. One of the things that I love about using Writer, if you haven't used Writer, is I hit this and now I got a problem with my code. It shows me the problem here, shows me I have a problem here, shows me it's in this folder, shows me it's in this project, shows me it's in this solution. So if there's something wrong with your code, very quickly I can just jump down and go, oh, hey, what's in this? Oh, there it is. I just come over here to the side, look for the red, there it is, it's expecting that. Oh, hang on, I can fix that pretty quick. So that's really awesome. Now we'll hit the refresh here. And everything now is happening in our services instead of in that groups.razor, and we created what I like to call dumb components. It turns out that when you're building a Blazor application, or an Angular application for that matter, dumb components are actually smarter. Really weird, but that's how it works. And we call it a dumb component because we've removed all that logic. There's no logic, no thinking happening in those components. All it's really doing at this point is rendering. And so we pulled that out, and it just makes it work better. So let's jump back into code here. And we've refreshed this, so let's look at the browser over here. We'll refresh the browser and make sure that everything's still working the way we expect it to. So we'll add a group. This will be Fernando's group.
Yo. High performance.
Look at that. Look how fast it loaded too. Like it just, like, it's so fast. I can
That's
go
what I
back,
said.
forth. I can, we can delete Blake's group. He wasn't paying attention, right? Definitely delete Becca's group because I'm in it. I don't and you guys thought it was going to be about my wife, right? No, she's awesome. It's just that I put myself in that group and I don't know any tasks I do. So here it is. It's
Just
working.
sleeping on the cat.
It's pretty fast, pretty smooth operation, and it's running on Blazor using C#. And yeah, it's got some bugs, and those bugs are actually tied to some of the UI components that I'm using. Some of the setup that takes a little more time. It's not completed, but you know, I was just trying to get this ready. Like I said, procrastination. So I don't promise bug-free code, which is why we have the disclaimer at the bottom. So this really doesn't multi-tenant app anyway, so if everybody's using it, I feel blessed though, especially if you have a sport in Mountain Dew addiction. So that is, we've cleaned up that one, and it's now 7:09. I don't think I'm going to try and clean up the other one at this point because it's kind of getting late, and I don't know, but I'll leave the code like this, and you guys can download the code from a repo, and I'll put the link next to the video on Facebook, and you can play with it and see if you can get the rest of it looking as pretty pristine as this. It's very nice. Any other questions about Blazor?
Actually, just stepping back a little bit, can you talk about the benefits or pain points of Blazor versus something like React or Angular? So talk a little bit about Angular today. Is there any general pluses or minuses for adopting something like Blazor over those other two frameworks?
It really depends on one thing, and that is what your backend is written in. If your backend is written in .NET, I would go Blazor all the way. If you guys are a complete JavaScript shop and you're writing Node.js applications using Express, I love Express. It's a wonderful tool, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you that C# is better than every language. I really think that different languages have different benefits based on what you're doing. I think that 99.9% of the time, C# does really, 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 really well. I think that if you're doing something that, I mean, you're just dealing with petabytes of data all day long and asynchronous communications, just you are handling the heck out of a server. Like, let's say you were going to run a marketing service like Rakuten. Rakuten's probably one of the companies that comes to mind for me. But what Rakuten does, they have these ads all over the web at all times, and people clicking on them all day long, and you know they're tracking those clicks, and their API is hammered, and they built it in Go. Go is a better language for that. And if someone came to me and wanted to build a system like what Rakuten had, I'd probably do backend in Go. But if I do your backend in .NET, what I don't want to do is build this library that has all my models in it and not be able to use those models again and have to build completely different copies of my model and my logic. So I like to, wherever I can, I want to reuse that code because it's going to help me be able to develop your solution faster. It's going to help me keep that code clean and organized. And it's going to help me keep things in sync between the back end and the front end. And so as you're building these huge, large-scale enterprise applications, some of these are multi-tenant, they're huge code bases. The last thing that you want to do is to make a change here. You got to go to this file, jump to this file, come over here. Don't forget this one that's hidden down here in this library. Then you got to go over here and write this in JavaScript. This one's in TypeScript. This one's in Go. This one's. You don't want to do that. All right. That's unmanageable code, and that's why so many of these huge projects fail. It's because they spend all this time tracing down all these loose wires. That honestly, if you use a framework like Blazor, you get rid of those. Or if you're using, like I said, Express and Node.js on the back end, then I would totally go Angular on the front end. I think Angular is a wonderful tool. And it's the reason that I brought so many of these premises from Angular, so many of these things that were really good about Angular that I loved about it, I brought it and our team uses those in our .NET Blazor. So when we develop these Blazor applications, we're paying attention to these things. These are things that our engineers are trained to monitor, to look at, and to be aware of. And so, if you're working on an Angular application, you want to be tracking those same things. These same mistakes that you saw in my code today when I started, versus where we ended, these are the same mistakes you can make in Angular. You can do the exact same things in Angular. You can write sloppy code in any language, and you can write clean code in any language. And honestly, whether you're doing Python, JavaScript, or TypeScript, or Go language, that doesn't really matter. What matters is try to minimize duplication as much as possible. You're going to be a more effective engineer, your team's going to be more effective, and you're going to get your projects out faster if you do that. So I think that's the biggest benefit. And honestly, when we get beyond that, there are some performance boosts from running WebAssembly over running translated languages that run in the browser like JavaScript. But you don't run TypeScript ever in the browser, right? Which means you transpile TypeScript to JavaScript, and then it's still running JavaScript. But anytime that you're doing that, that's going to be slower than running anything in WebAssembly. Anything that gets compiled to ones and zeros and passed to the processor is always going to be faster than what you can do with just a browser-born language like JavaScript. But if you're just dealing with rendering on the front end and you're more on your back end for where your power's coming from, then JavaScript's a wonderful way. Or if you're just using JavaScript on both sides, JavaScript's still a wonderful way to go. To point out something else too, when it comes to WebAssembly, I love C#, but Python runs in WebAssembly. You can run Go language in WebAssembly. There's compilers for a lot of different languages that bring it into WebAssembly. So you're not just limited to C#, right? You want to kind of pick what's best for your environment. But there's so much richness in the .NET Core world, and so many free libraries out there to use that, honestly, if you're not doing JavaScript, I would really focus on something like C#, unless you have a very, very specific reason not to. Anything else? All right, I'm going to look one more time online, see if there's some comments that maybe we're missing. And do we have comments? Anybody messaging me? Any comments? Looking, no comments. I hope that doesn't mean that there's no one watching. But even if there's no one watching today, maybe someone will watch tomorrow. But that's my spiel for Blazor tonight. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Obviously, I'm using Bootstrap. There's also some material design elements that you can get access to make your design life really easy. And it wouldn't be fair for me to talk about all this and show these wonderful designs like this one here without mentioning Nice Page, which is what allowed me to throw together something that looked halfway decent in 30 seconds. Really pretty, that's all Nice Page right there. Questions, comments about tooling, about anything, Blazor.net? I've got another 4 minutes, please.
Have you messed with any other JetBrains IDEs? I noticed you were using.
Oh yeah, I've used all of them, I think. WebStorms is what I used when I was working on Angular. I wrote all my Angular applications in WebStorms.
I don't think I've used PyCharm, but I fell off pretty quick with their IDE in general. I got to try to work.
It's also, like, for .NET, I found it to be a lot more lightweight, so it doesn't utilize quite as much resource on the system.
I saw that too in my Linux system and it was kicking my ass a little bit.
And it's really a top-notch IDE, and one of the coolest things about it is, it runs everywhere. Like, I can run the exact same IDE on my Mac, on my PC, and on my Linux box. Same IDE. So when I get used to it, I don't have to change because I go to some other system. And I guess you could say the same for VS Code, but VS Code isn't quite as integrated. There's not as much that's built in, and it's not as rich. And people will tell you, well, there's Visual Studio for Mac, but that's really just a reskinned version of Xamarin Studio. And we all pray that someday they'll take Visual Studio off the PC and spread it around. But so far, no luck.
There's probably still too much from the days when .NET was only on Windows.
There's a lot more to Visual Studio than just .NET Core. And so I think really a large portion of it comes into just how integrated it is into the operating system. It's in there deep. It's in there deep. But Rider's a wonderful IDE. It works everywhere.
Emacs.
It's not an IDE.
It's an operating system with an OK text editor.
I guess I won't say
Yeah,
supply
say you've
text
got a
for-
Raspberry Pi and that's all the power you have. Sure, but why not go Phantom? I mean, then you have a little more power. So I just got the throat cutting thing from my wife. I think that means that we're done for the night. And I'd like to thank everybody for attending. I'd like to thank those of you who joined us online. And if you have any questions, email them to john.smith@apic.com. Join us on apic.com, and in the coming days, like I said, we'll be posting the new apic.net users group website, which will be its own dedicated website. And tonight, I do want to point out that tonight, we gave a blurb for Apic, but we do want to create something that is community driven. So even if you're working for some other company, you're not looking for another opportunity, we're hoping to have a lot more presentations. We're going to do a boot camp once a quarter. So in October, towards the end of October, we're planning one right now for a Blazor Day, where we'll build from the beginning of the day to the end of the day. We will build an API from scratch, move into a Blazor app, and before you're done, you'll take home a complete Blazor application from our boot camp and have a better understanding of how all that comes together. That's coming late October. We're really promoting this group, and we want it to grow. We want it to be there not just for our company, but for other companies too. If you're part of another company and you guys are looking for quality engineers, we'd love to hear from you about sponsoring these events. And we're hoping to take these nationwide. So if you want to start a chapter in your local area, please reach out to me about that as well. Thank you guys for joining, and have a great night.
Thank you.